and welcome to the Flores Garden. I know it's been a long while since I've done a book haul, especially since a few months ago I was moving, and while I was in the process of moving I bought more books and I kind of lost track of what new books I got during that period, and as well as so many after. But for the past couple of months, I'm going to say a couple, it's actually been I don't know how long, and this pile right beside me is pretty big. Anyways, I've had this pile of books on my table for like ever, so let's get through this. First one is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, except they are two separate people and they are detectives. And I read the original Jekyll and Hyde like forever ago when I was about 10. I didn't like it. I reread it again when I was 18. I still didn't like it, but I do love the concept of Jekyll and Hyde despite not actually liking the original story. So, yay, Jekyll and Hyde plus detectives. I love detectives, in case you haven't noticed from my Sherlock Holmes videos. To continue with my Greek mythology obsession, specifically Percy Jackson, I have Percy Jackson in Spanish. Hooray! And I love the covers. They're just so pretty. Battle of the Labyrinth. The Titan's Curse. The Sea of Monsters. The Lightning Thief. I swear I will read them eventually. And then, of course, The Sun and the Star with my sweet baby Nico and Will Solace. I love them both. It's really funny because I got this book for my birthday. My mom takes me to Barnes & Noble for my birthday. And I grabbed this one right away. And she just gave me this funny look. Okay, confession time. I actually don't speak Spanish. I know, I'm a Mexican that doesn't speak Spanish, shocker. But when you talk to me in Spanish, I understand you perfectly. I just cannot communicate back in Spanish, but I will communicate in English. As for reading, yes, I understand it completely when I'm reading it. I'm a little slow at reading in Spanish, but I do understand it. So when I grabbed this book, my mom looked at it and then looked at me and she's like, "You don't know Spanish?" I'm like, "No, Mom, I understand it." And I opened it up to a random page and I was reading it out loud and then I translated it in English. She's like, "Oh, you do understand." I'm like, "Exactly, I understand. I just cannot talk in Spanish." Okay, now that that secret's out of the way, moving on. A comic book about Hades. Hooray! I love Hades, both in Percy Jackson and this and pretty much every version of Hades, except for the movie Percy Jackson. I mean, I loved the style of that Hades. I would wear that outfit, but I didn't really like that Hades personality. This one I got from one of my work friends. He had like a full box full of these books. And I actually don't know why. I should ask him, really. But I said I might borrow a copy, and he's like, "Oh, just take one." I'm like, "Oh, cool, thanks." So, yeah, because I remember seeing this at Barnes & Noble, and I'm like, "Oh, that sounds really cool." But then I say that about a lot of books I find at Barnes & Noble, and I tell myself I will get them later, but I usually forget. Nightmares and Sueños. It's a book about Bruno Madrigal from Encanto. And as you can see, my Spanish is pretty decent. Anyways, it's a book about Bruno before he was, I don't want to say cast out because he wasn't cast out. He left of his own accord, but before he left, it's a book about him and his powers before he left. One is None. This one was actually written by one of my former English teachers. So I don't know if he's aware of this channel, but if he is, Hi, Mark. I call him Mark now because we're both adults and he's not my teacher anymore. But I actually peer-reviewed this before he published it. It is amazing, and I'm not just saying that because he's my former teacher. Like, I read it after work, and when I was at work, I just kept thinking, I want to go home so that I can keep on reading it. It's post-apocalyptic, and it's about a family and how they manage to navigate their way through this post-apocalyptic world. And it was just so intense, and I can't explain it without giving away spoilers. But I do highly recommend this. It was great. It was fantastic. This one, I was just kind of browsing at Barnes & Noble, and the author himself was there selling his books. So I stopped at his table, browsed through what he had. I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. So I'm like, yeah. The wish list ones, it's a book about Jafar from Aladdin. And it's basically his story before he became the vizier to the Sultan. And Aladdin is my second favorite Disney movie, so I was like super excited to see this. I'm like, I need it. I have to read it. The Courting of Bristol Keats. I liked Mary E. Pearson's other books. I actually have them somewhere. Oh. So you can kind of see right here her other books on my shelf. I loved those. I've read them several times. So when I found out she came out with another book, I'm like, I'm buying it because I love her writing. It's great. Wings of Starlight. If you were a Tinkerbell girly like I was, which is kind of funny because the Tinkerbell books came out when I was in middle school, but the movie itself came out when I was 14, 15, somewhere around there. I was a freshman. And I was obsessed with Tinkerbell. I kind of lost that obsession for a while, but I still love Tinkerbell. And in what was it? The Secret of the Wings, that movie, where they talked about the fairies from the Winter Woods, they mentioned that Queen Clarion had been in love with a winter fairy named Lord Mallory. And I remember when I first saw that, my mind was like blown. I'm like, what? There's a little love affair here that we never knew about. Why are they not together? I am sad. I need more information on this. So this book, which was recently published, is the backstory of Queen Clarion and Lord Mallory. And Allison Saft, thank you. I love you for writing this. In fact, I started it. I'm not very far, obviously, but I am loving it so far, and I can't wait to read the rest. Liar's Kingdom. I actually found this when I went to go buy The Secret of the Wings, or Wings of Starlight, sorry. I saw the cover, and of course, Cinderella. I'm like, oh, Cinderella. I like fairy tale retellings. This one, what if Cinderella never went to the ball, but the prince thought she did? Because we all know that part of the story never made sense. Like, you saw her face all night and you don't know what she looks like by the next morning. Anyways, the whole point of this story is that Elle, who lives with an abusive stepfamily because, you know, it's Cinderella, she gets mistaken for the girl that the prince danced with at the ball. And she's all like, yeah, you know what? That was me, because I'd rather live a lie instead of with my abusive family. So I'm like, you know what? That sounds really cool. I want to know if she gets caught. Plus, I love the design here. It looks like Lily James from the live action. So again, when I was on my way to go buy the Queen Clarion book, right after I grabbed the Cinderella book, I took like 2 steps towards the checkout and I saw Mulan retelling. And I love Mulan. I love Disney princesses. I love Disney. But this is, according to the synopsis, this is supposed to be a bit more accurate to the original tale. But I read a summarized version of the original tale, so I don't know how closely it is going to be to the tale. Either way, I'm excited to read it because I like the story of Mulan. After picking up the Mulan book, again, I was on my way to the checkout when I passed the little kids section and found the princess swap. What if Cinderella woke up one day in the Beast's castle? And what if Belle woke up in Cinderella's home? Like, you know what? That sounds really cool. So I'm going to buy it. Plus, look at the cover. It's pretty. The 13th Child, it's based off of the fairy tale by Brothers Grimm, Godfather Death. I actually really like that original tale. Basically, the Grimm version of Godfather Death is that this couple had a baby and they were looking everywhere for somebody to be a godparent, but they had a hard time choosing. They didn't want any holy person to be godparent because what if the child is not a good person or is not holy enough? Then the godparent would be biased and be like, oh, I don't like my godchild. So they didn't go for any holy person. They didn't go for any sinners either, because what if the godchild was a good person and not a sinner? So, you know, if the godparent was a sinner, they would be biased because like, oh, your child is way too good. I don't like my godchild. They refused anybody that was family. They refused anybody that wasn't family. They refused people who were rich because what if the child grew up to be poor and the rich was biased because, oh, you're not rich, so I don't like you. And they didn't choose anybody poor either because what if the child grew up rich, in which case the godparent would be like, oh, you're rich, I don't like you, but you know what, you're rich, so I might take advantage of that. And the parents just didn't know what to do. So then they ended up meeting Death, and Death became godparent because Death is not biased. Death will take anybody. It was a very deep story. And I really liked it because it was interesting. So when I found out that this is just like a more expanded version of Godfather Death, I'm like, you know what? I will grab it because that is awesome. So I have been using Duolingo. This is not an ad. I have been using Duolingo and I've been learning French. I took 2 years of French in high school, so it really wasn't much, but it was enough to like get pretty far in Duolingo. And because I do a unit a day, I am advancing pretty quickly. And when I was at the bookstore, I found this, short stories in French. So I like flipped through it. And I'm like, oh, I actually understand like at least half of it. So I took it because, you know, it'll help me later. And finally, Bemused by Farah Roshan. It is about the muses from Hercules, as you can tell by the cover. I love them. It's basically just the muses' backstory. You know, where do they come from? What are they all about besides singing amazing songs in Hercules, obviously? But it mostly focuses on Calliope, her point of view. And if you're not familiar with Greek mythology, Calliope is the muse of epic storytelling. I actually named my laptop Calliope because I use my laptop to tell epic stories. I am a writer, so yes, it fits. That's all that I had on my table. I'm pretty sure there's like a whole bunch on my bookshelf that I forgot about. But that's all I have for now. So I'll see you next time. Bye.